Hey everybody, so we're finished up talking about the eastern areas now of China and India. We're move on now to ancient and classical Greece. A great unit that you have some experience with already. We're going to kind of look at ancient and classical Greece in terms of three distinct periods of history and kind of get a general idea and feel for each of those distinct periods of history. And so we look at ancient, quote unquote, ancient Greek history. We have a few different periods that we look at. We have the idea of prehistory. So before history is written down, or before a language we use is written down, is really available. So that'd be the ideas of Mycenae, which was right over here, and the Minoa, which is right down here on the modern day island of Crete. So that's one part of history to look at. We then see a dark ages in Greek history as well. And we're going to start seeing what we think of as ancient Greece, really, if we will, starting around the time of a guy named Homer, around 700 BCE. And so we can even take that ancient Greek time and split into two different periods. We have the classical period. That's what we think Greece is known for. Athens and Sparta and wars and the Persian Wars, if you've seen the movie 300, those kind of things, what we see here in terms of classical period of Greece. We still see a period called the Hellenistic period as well, where you see Greek culture spread throughout much of the ancient world with Alexander the Great around 346 BCE. And we see everything fall apart then around 200 with the rise of the Roman Empire. And so that's one of the things we're going to take a look at in terms of ancient Greek history. So we'll spend a couple weeks talking about this and see just what impact these Greeks had on our history yet today. And so we're starting with a place called the Minoan civilization. Now it's on the island of Crete, which going back to our map here is right down here. You can see it right over there. And it was a Bronze Age civilization. Right? It was on the island, and one of the biggest excavators of this group was a British guy named Sir Arthur Evans. He was a British archaeologist who didn't find it, but he really excavated a lot of different pieces of this Minoan civilization. One big things we found was bronze, like we saw used in Sumeria, like we saw used in other places like China. Bronze is a big thing here. The only thing is we find weapons, we find tools, but no real evidence of big wars that were fought. We have huge big cities, the biggest city being a city called Knossos, which was this huge big city with huge buildings. We're talking palaces of 1,500 rooms, those kind of things that were put together. We have these a form of writing we find here. The writing is a series of lines. You see it in the picture here, and we're sure there's a spoken language probably. But we're not really sure, what it said or how it was. It's nothing like modern day Greek we think of today. It's something very, very different. Now, a lot of people that have studied Knossos and the Minoans think it may have been an equal society. That means that men and women, ranks, that kind of stuff was pretty equal because we don't see any kind of distinctions in their artwork, distinctions in their painting. Kind of say that one group is better than the other. We see men and women together, we see class together, those kind of things, except for maybe a king. But there would be some questions about the idea of equal society as well. Also, these guys were kind of cool, and they had a sport we think called bull jumping, where bulls and that were a really big part of society, and possibly did a sport where they jumped over bulls. So here's a big palace we talked about. Here's what it looks like today, obviously right here. Okay, here's what we think it looked like a couple thousand years ago. Huge, huge palace used by the kings of Minoa in Crete. And inside these palaces, you would have found rooms. Like we're talking 1,500 different rooms in this huge big palace that was put together for the king. Now, the palace was destroyed eventually when Minoan civilization fell, maybe through earthquakes, that kind of stuff. But inside the palace, we have found different artifacts, a lot of fragments of artifacts, so fragments of artwork, fragments of gold and silver and jewels, those kind of things. But it's not whole pieces a lot of times. When they found it, it was all fragments. Here's what it looks like today after a partial restoration. Look by the railing right here, the modern day metal railing here. And Sir Arthur Evans, along with other archaeologists, tried to restore it as a way to kind of bring the history back alive for people and visitors. We think that they had a huge trading fleet, as a guess, we think. That they had really heavily defended ships to protect from pirates. So the pirates have been on the Mediterranean Sea, not pirates of the Caribbean, pirates of the Mediterranean here. Because think about it, you're on a little small island, you gotta be able to get more materials you can't get there. Things like certain foods, metals, that kind of stuff was not available on the island. One of the biggest things about the island of Crete, going back to my map here again, it has natural harbors here like this. They can actually protect you from storms and those kind of things. They'll be able to dock ships in. And what's really cool is we found different items from the Greek mainland, from the Hittites in Turkey, Egyptians. We found their items in the Minoan cities, and we found Minoan things in their place. So we know evidence then that trade existed. The biggest thing we have is art. And one of the things they used was something called the fresco. Frescoes were these big, huge art pieces done on walls basically with little pieces of stone and glass tiles. They're cut nice and neat to make these huge, beautiful pictures. If you go to the state capitol today in Madison, in the rotunda room, you see these 4 big murals around there. Same thing, this fresco art, these little glass tiles. They would use whole walls, floors, those kind of things. And some pieces still survive today. This one here, though they have been restored and kind of fixed a little bit in terms of damage from war, from when Minoa fell. They show a lot of cool things, especially like female goddesses, priestesses, like we see here. Here's the sport of bull jumping. We think we see a young acrobat here jumping over top of a bull, those kind of things. See a lot of sculptures here. See what you see in the sculpture here. It's all sculpted from Minoa. And as you look at it, you see this pot here, this pottery with this big squid type creature on it. See the same squid type theme over here, this black ink on the pottery. Over here you have this blue bowl with these huge horns on it. And so it may tell you about that these things are important to the people, that they use this pottery for different things. Other artwork paintings you see here, things like our priestess over here. You see the colors, you see this animal, you see the bull horns. Obviously, not all these paintings are exact from when they were made. They have been restored over time. So there's a question what happened to Minoans. We really don't know. There are 4 big theories of what actually happened to them. One theory is that they moved to Greece, that people just packed up and left because of something like natural disaster, that kind of stuff. They could have been invaded by other people. Another people called the Mycenaeans, which were on the Greek mainland. Maybe invaded them and took them over to Greece. Maybe the whole place got destroyed by a natural disaster, like an earthquake or a tidal wave, or some combo of all 3. Who really knows? Where this place was a great architectural find, though, of the early history of the Greek people. The other area here is Mycenae. Now, here you see on the map, Mycenae is right up here, kind of where the modern-day city of Corinth, the Greek city of Corinth was, kind of by Sparta is over here, kind of as well. And so it was basically a very different than Minoa, that it was a warrior culture, if you will. So basically, for the Mycenaeans, the better warrior you were, the higher you were in rank in society. The reason we think that is that people were buried with their weapons and goods. They have these big cities like this, we're all walled in here, and we found. And when they buried their kings, they would mummify some of them and actually bury them with their swords and their weapons and that kind of stuff. It kind of gives a sign of a warrior culture type deal. I mean, these tombs were huge, big, huge tombs. And in fact, sometimes the bodies were sitting up with their weapons, like not lying down, but sitting up ready to fight, ready to go bust skulls. We do have a type of writing we found. They call it linear B. I'll show you some examples of this in class. It is a kind of modern day Greek, but not like modern day Greek. We have some idea of what it might say, but overall we really don't know too much. We know we had that type of writing, this idea of linear B, but it's not a type of writing we can necessarily take and interpret everything as part of it. And so after Mycenae falls apart eventually, and eventually they fall apart due to wars and those kind of things, we have a dark age in Greece. Okay, there's a dark age here. A dark age basically means that things fall apart. So between 1100 and 750 BCE, things in Greece just kind of go downhill. You see a decline in farming. So we can actually look back and kind of see, hey, there's less farming at this time period through the archaeology we look at, the layers of dirt and those kind of things. There's no records written down. We lose this idea of writing. And in some places that have dark ages, the whole civilization actually loses the ability to write. We have no writings from this time period. We have other issues come up here too. A lot of times, though, the only time we have history is through oral history, stories and poems and epics that kind of tell the history of things. And so, and part of this events we see here, this Dark Age, may come from the time of the famous Trojan War, talked about in Homer's writings. And so, a lot of our history here in this Dark Age, kind of, I'm not sure what actually goes on here when we get towards a more classical Greek civilization. We do know happens is that some Greeks do move around other places. So some Greeks here from this place here moved to what's called the Ionic Coast, or Ionia, which is right over here on the area of modern day Turkey. And we know they start trading, okay, because they can't provide for the land. We have some evidence of trade happening. It's kind of around the time that things get going again in terms of Greece after the edge of the Dark Age. We know these iron tools versus bronze and copper, that kind of thing, though bronze and copper are still pretty prevalent. But we have a new alphabet. We get rid of that linear B and bring in that alphabet from the Phoenicians. We looked at that earlier in our ancient civilization unit. We had that Phoenician alphabet, how it was related to a modern day Greek alphabet. And we kind of start seeing that being brought over here from the Phoenicians and becoming a new language for Greece. Now, a lot of the history for Greece is brought in through epic poems. It's really long poems like the Mahabharata, but in Greeks they were sung with like a lyre or a lute, basically like a guitar. You see this dude playing here, where he would sit and play these epic poems and tell these stories about the great kings and great mythology of the area, especially of Mycenae, those kind of places. And so one of the people we have that is a really big part of this is a dude named Homer. Not Homer Simpson for the record, okay? He's not yellow, he's not drinking tough beer. But Homer was a blind poet. You kind of see an image we think he looked like here in this statue. And he wrote two great epics, the Iliad and the Odyssey. He didn't actually write them himself. He actually wrote them down from former oral histories, or somebody he told them to write them down. Now, these oral histories are happening 500 years after they go down. So there's two big writings, the Iliad and the Odyssey, talk about the Trojan War and great wars and those kind of things, have interactions between gods and famous figures. So the mythological Greek gods like Zeus and Aphrodite, those kind of things, all come into these stories now. And the biggest thing about the Iliad and the Odyssey is that his writings were used as education in this part of the world for a long, long time. They're very, very influential writings because they taught a person how you should act. And essentially, they taught a man how to be a man at this time. You need to have pride in what you do. You need to be brave. You have to have this courage, and you'll be able to fight all this kind of stuff. Especially arete, which is essentially the willingness to fight, protect your family. And you see this in a lot of Homer's epics about the famous stories and those kind of things. That people use these. This is like the main education in Greece and Rome for the longest time. In Roman history, think about guys like Julius Caesar. They were educated by reading Homer, and that's how they learned in a way to be the people that they became later on. Here are kind of two stories we have. So his first epic poem, the Iliad, is basically the history of the Trojan War. We have this love triangle between Helen, who was considered to be the most beautiful woman in the world, essentially. Okay, Menelaus, who's a Mycenaean prince, and Paris was a prince of a place called Troy, which was over in Turkey. And essentially, there was this big story of Aphrodite, this great goddess, who was kind of part of this game that they were doing in terms of who gets to marry this whole big person. So we sort of see this interaction between the gods and goddesses, the mythical figures, and the rulers. We'll watch a little video on this in class as well. And so essentially, we have a very famous war, basically a 10-year war fought between a Greek alliance led by Sparta, the Mycenaeans, and the Ionian city of Troy in Turkey. And so we got to get the idea of the Trojan horse here. We get the idea of a famous names like Odysseus and Achilles and Menelaus. And the question of, did this war really actually happen? Now, we're going to talk about this in class in terms of this war really happening based off Homer's writings. The other book he has is called the Odyssey. And it basically follows the travels of Odysseus, who was one of the big generals of the Trojan War, from a place called. And the story how it goes is that he, as he's leaving the war, basically, he angers the gods and is sent out of his way for 10 years, where he actually goes all over the Mediterranean Sea, blown off, of course, by a storm, faces all these different challenges, and is messed with by the different gods. He sees a Cyclops, he's teased by these sirens trying to bring him and his crew on shore to keep his island forever. He fights with the Greek god Apollo over his cattle. Those kind of things all come through a big part of this. And so basically he needs to prove to his wife that, in the end, when he finally gets back to his city of Ithaca, where he returns to, he needs to take his kingdom back and prove to his wife before she remarries that it's really him. And do this, he takes a bow and arrow and shoots an arrow through a series of loops in a palace. We kind of see this idea of the great hero that who never gives up, who fights for their family, the idea of that great hero in Homer. That's really about this today, guys. We're going to do a couple things in class. Probably Friday, we'll talk about Minoa. And then on Monday and Tuesday in class, we're looking at Homer and the idea of Troy and those kind of things. Actually read a little homework in class as well. Thanks for listening, guys. Please make sure your notes are done for this by Friday of this week so we can start talking about the Minoans. Have a great day, guys. Thank you.